The first man dropped where he stood. No warning, no stumble, just a collapse that broke the whispering in the room. The sound of his body on the floor echoed off the stone. People pulled back, leaving his coins where they fell, a small, bright scatter on the ground. His name was Ananias. He had come with a gift. Since the weeks after the crucifixion and the stories of the empty tomb, the believers in Jerusalem had lived close, sharing what they had. Some sold fields or houses and brought the money to the apostles for anyone in need. A man named Joseph, called Barnabas, had done that not long before. He laid the full price of a field at their feet, and people talked about the trust it showed. Ananias and his wife, Sapphira, had sold a property too. They agreed to keep back part of the price and bring the rest as if it were all. No one had ordered them to sell, and no rule forced them to give the whole amount. The choice they made was about the story they told, with what they set down. In their house, they counted the coins and set aside a portion. The rest went into a bag for the meeting. When Ananias reached the place, he put the money before the apostles the way others had done. Peter asked a question that left no room for reply. Why had he let deceit into his heart? Why pretend this was the full price? The field had been his before the sale. The money had been his after. The lie was not to a man, Peter said, but to God. Ananias heard the words, and then he fell. He stopped breathing and did not rise. Young men stepped forward, wrapped the body, and carried it out to be buried. Others stood watching, unsure what to say. The coins stayed where they were for a moment longer, then someone gathered them up with shaking hands. News spread outward like ripples from a dropped stone. People heard that a man who lied about his gift had fallen dead where he stood, and fear ran ahead of the details. About 3 hours later, Sapphira came in. She had not heard what had happened. Peter asked a plain question. Was the price they received the sum that lay at their feet? She said it was. Peter told her the men who had buried her husband were at the door and would carry her out as well. She fell at once. When the young men came back, they found her body where she had stood, lifted her, and laid her beside her husband in the ground. The fear that took hold of the community after that was not a rumor. It lived in the room, and in the houses, and in the alleys that week. Everyone who heard felt it, whether they stood with the believers or watched from a distance. People repeated the facts in the short form cities used to make sense of sudden death. They lied about the money. They died in front of everyone. What lay beneath the short form was this. There had been no demand to sell. There had been no tax, no quota. Barnabas's gift and the others like it had been free choices. Ananias and Sapphira had chosen to look like they did the same while holding back part of the price. The story in Acts called that choice lying to the Holy Spirit. It said God judged them then and there. It did not offer a cause of death a physician could write down. It spoke instead in the language of judgment, swift and public. The young movement in Jerusalem had been marked by bold talk and shared meals and sudden courage. Men who had hidden before the crucifixion now taught openly. Women who had wept at the tomb now spoke first about what they had seen. Those who joined the group sold what they could and refused to let anyone go hungry. The story of Ananias and Sapphira broke in like a cold wind. It said that the God they preached was not only generous, but also holy, and that lies about generosity were not harmless. Witnesses told the tale with the same plainness the text holds. Ananias carried money in and fell down. Sapphira answered a question and fell down. Young men wrapped both bodies and buried them. There was no speech at a graveside. There was only the shocked work of carry, dig, and cover. In the days that followed, some people kept their distance. Others drew near with more caution than before. Those who remained spoke carefully about what belonged to whom and what did not. Peter and the others continued to teach in public courts where their enemies could see them. Support did not evaporate, but the tone changed. Any easy talk about giving turned sober when someone mentioned the couple's names. The story included nothing about the couple's motives beyond the choice itself. It did not say they needed money or feared poverty. It did not give them lines to explain themselves or a final word to each other before the lie was told. It offered no defense. It set their act alongside the gifts of others and let the contrast do the speaking. It then gave the outcome in a few sentences and moved on to what happened next with the apostles. Over the years, people tried to fit the event to their own sense of how judgment should work. Some said the shock of being exposed killed them. Others said it was a miracle of punishment, as clear as any miracle of healing in the same book. Arguments did not change the words on the page. Acts said they lied to God. Acts said they died. The effect on the community was the point that followed. Fear fell on all who heard. That line stayed. The couple's names became shorthand in sermons and stories. Ananias and Sapphira stood for a generous face laid over a different truth. Their deaths became a warning that ran ahead of would-be donors who wanted credit without cost. In some places, their story was read when the collection plate passed, not to threaten, but to remind people that gifts were not theater. Where money and praise met, the tale insisted on honesty. The scene itself remained spare: a room, a bag, a question. A body carried out. It was not a riot, not a trial, not a band of soldiers. It was a meeting where a lie did not stay covered for even a minute. Some of the same men who had fled when guards came for Jesus now watched as judgment unfolded without any guard in sight. They kept order and kept teaching. If you stand back from the details, the shape is simple. The early believers had held their goods lightly. One man sold a field and brought all the money. A couple sold a property and brought part while claiming it was all. 2 confrontations, 2 deaths, one community suddenly aware that life together had sharp edges as well as soft. The story sat there in the middle of a book full of signs and preaching and arrests, saying that holiness was not a word for later. There were still poor people to feed, widows to protect, enemies to face. The apostles did not close the doors. They kept meeting, kept telling the story of Jesus openly, kept welcoming those who came honestly. But no one in that room forgot the day when money handled wrong turned into a warning with names. Ananias, Sapphira. They had stood where everyone could see them. They had answered with their mouths while their hands told a different tale, and they had fallen before any person laid a hand on them. The bones of the story were tight enough to carry across centuries without ornament. It did not need extra dialogue or speculation. It said what happened and left the meaning near the surface where anyone could reach for it. That the God preached in those days cared about truth as much as gifts, and that lying used as a ladder to honor could break beneath a person in front of the very people they hoped to impress. Thank you for listening to Divine Crime. Subscribe for more stories from the most dangerous book ever written.